and introduce to others Dr. Michael Eric Dyson.
Thank you so much, my friend. I've been sitting here since about 6:23, so I've been seeing y'all's discussion about medical marijuana. What size your butt was. I mean, your t-shirt. I know this is a government outfit, so let me calm down.
Okay, sir.
What an honor it is to be here with you all today and to have this opportunity to chat with you. So I guess I'll give a few opening remarks, and then we'll have a conversation, maybe some Q&A if that's acceptable to you all. Obviously, this is an incredibly propitious time of the year, Black History Month. I know a lot of Black people have conspiracy theories about why it's the coldest month and the shortest in the year, and they think it was a hoax pulled on us. But we know that Carter G. Woodson, the founder of Black History Month, chose this month to celebrate, and initially it was Black History Week, celebrating both the birthdays of Frederick Douglass and Abraham Lincoln. But in 1976, when it was extended to Black History Month under the presidency of Jimmy Carter, we have been celebrating this month, talking about the contributions of Black people to this nation. And your powerful theme here of resiliency in our advocacy, power in our voice, and dedication in our hearts. That's a heck of a troika, a triumvirate, a trilogy, a three-part, tripartite celebration there. So I just want to riff off of those themes and then open it up for Q&A. When we think about resiliency in our advocacy, we have had to be resilient in advocating for freedom and advocating for justice and advocating for democracy and advocating for emancipation across the board, our liberty, in advocating for total justice, in advocating for the kinds of benefits, rights, and privileges that others are heir to at birth. Ostensibly, allegedly, and supposedly, these rights attain to us as well. And yet we realize that in this nation, Black people, Africans in America, have had to fight for our rights, have had to advocate for our rights, have had to advocate strongly for our emancipation, that often when no one else was speaking up for us, we spoke up for ourselves. It is true that there were other allies who joined us, made common cause with our extraordinary plight in America. But make no mistake, from the very beginning, we have had to advocate for ourselves. We have had to speak for ourselves, to talk for ourselves, to suggest that the conditions to which we are heir in this nation have been fundamentally unjust, that we must move forward in the name of the emancipatory spirit that informed us when we were first extracted from our resting place in African soil, in our native haunt, and brought here collectively, symbolically, in 1619 to Jamestown, Virginia. 20 some odd Negroes, as we were referred to, brought here against our will, forcible migrants to this nation. We didn't come over on the Nina and the Pina. We came over on slave ships that sought to destroy us. First of all, when we think about the 12.8 million folk who were brought here, about the 1.8 million folk who died in the Middle Passage on the route here, and when we think about the extraordinary nature of the servitude that we endured, the slavery that we harshly endured. The rawhide whip of the overseer, as Howard Thurman talked about it. The long rows of cotton that we faced, making America all that it could be, advocating in our bodies and in our limbs and in our musculature and our physical embodiment for the propagation of American democracy, for the propagation of American capital, for the health of this nation, even when we were demonized, even when we were destroyed, even when we were physically assaulted, even when we were beat down. We held high the bloodstained banner of our commitment to truths that transcended the vicious mistreatment to which we were heir as enslaved people in America. And from the very beginning, we began to advocate for our freedom, even if we were doing it in the hush harbor and the brush arbors where we praise God, or if we were doing it in ways that were far more subtle, when we learned to read, when we learned to write, when we learned to preach, and when we preached our soul's salvation. We were grasping hold of principles and practices, pericopes, that is, passages of scripture that suggested that we were going to fight the inhuman treatment that we were given, the dehumanizing impulse of a dominant white supremacist ethic that refused to acknowledge our humanity, that treated us fundamentally in hostile form, that beat us down, that whipped us for not dancing and singing. And we were forced to dance and sing for white brothers and sisters who were brought to plantations to show that we were happy, that we were inherently joyful, that our culture was inherently inferior, that we were not in any way deserving of righteous treatment in America. And yet we advocated from the very beginning. We did it among ourselves. We said that we would not take the interpretation of our lives by a dominant white supremacist culture, a culture that could not see us, could not hear us. Even when we sang our songs, we were singing songs to entertain the dominant white culture, but we were also singing songs to emancipate ourselves. Green trees are bending, ain't got long to stay here was a way of saying that, look, Harriet is coming through in the springtime, and we got to get our grits together because we got to get ready to get up out of here. That we were celebrating our own freedom and liberation, that we were having quilts that were being made that had arrows contained in them. And those arrows were telling us what direction to go in, what plantation to retreat to in order to find our route of escape on the Underground Railroad. And so we have advocated resiliently, and the resiliency of our advocacy means we've had to do it in multiple fashion. We can't do it simply in one way. We've had to find multiple means, whether through a drum. The reason they outlawed the drum is because we resorted to the drum to articulate our beliefs, ideals, hopes, aspirations in ways that the dominant white culture couldn't understand us. We had to learn to communicate with each other. There were varieties of ethnicities that were involved in the extraction of Africans from our native haunts. We were from different places. We spoke different languages. We had different ideas. We had beefs with each other. We had conflicts with each other. And yet we learned to meld out of those varieties of ethnicities from our African identity, a common Black identity. James Baldwin reminds us in The Fire Next Time in 1963 that race is a fiction, a social construction, as we now say it, a projection of a artificially engaged and arranged identity that we breathe life into, whether for good or ill. For ill in terms of whiteness being created out of the varieties of ethnicities that come here from Eastern and Western Europe, whether they were Jewish, Polish, Italian, or Irish, and then pulverized in the crucible of race into a whiteness that transcended their individual and particular ethnic identities. In the same way, Black people created a Blackness out of the varieties of African identities with which we were brought to this nation with. And so despite the chains and the whips, despite the inhuman treatment, we forged connection, we made compact, we created a tertium quid, a third thing, out of the varieties of African ethnicities that we were brought here under. And so we created what it meant to be Black in America. That's a particular thing, that's a specific thing. That's something that we created, borrowing from our African soil, borrowing from our African homeland, and yet creating something different out of that. And so we have had to be resilient in advocating for our freedom. We have had to be resilient in adapting ourselves to the conditions under which we had to preach and sing in order to communicate messages to one another, but strong messages and desirous messages of transformation, messages of emancipation, messages of liberation, messages of freedom, messages of love, messages of determination to constitute our communities over against a society that refused to acknowledge us even as human beings. Chattel slavery was the refusal to acknowledge us as people with souls. White evangelicals, who were more white than evangelical, as they have proved today, believed that we had no rights that even God would respect. Remember, in 1857, Roger B. Taney, the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court, said that Black people had no rights that white people were bound to respect. White evangelicals reinforced the pathology of the dehumanizing impulse toward African people in America. They did not believe that the gospel liberated us. They believed that the gospel should be used exclusively in a spiritualized way, but that it should not free us from the chains that had been placed upon our bodies. But our Black religious traditions, burgeoning in those fields, developing in those hush harbors, developing in those prayer houses, said that no, we do not believe that. We believe that God has called us to liberation and emancipation, that God wants us to be free, that we will not listen to white slave masters who will tell us that we are inherently inferior. And so we have had to advocate for ourselves at every level, at every moment of the development of American history. We had to prove that we were willing to advocate for our own liberation. And the resiliency of that advocacy means whether it's in a drum, whether it's in a throat, whether it's in a voice, whether it's in a sermon, whether it's in songs or rhythms that we produced, whatever the means was, whatever the modality was, the message was the same. We have got to find a way to liberate ourselves, to emancipate ourselves, to free ourselves from the encumbrances, from the chains and the shackles of a society that would not recognize us as God's children. And so the advocacy had to be resilient then, and the advocacy, of course, is resilient today. We have to find multiple streams to feed into the larger rivers and oceans of liberation in our own day. Whether that's in rap music, whether that's in Kirk Franklin's gospel music that's hyped up on postmodern vernacular forms within Black culture, whether that's in the straightforward movies that we put forward, or the comedies or the mysteries, whether that's in a body on a theatrical stage on Broadway, or whether that's in a local church where a preacher is sounding the alarm against the vicious practices of white supremacy. We continue to advocate for our freedom, advocate for our emancipation, advocate for our liberation, and continue to do so because we have inherited from our mothers and fathers, from our grandmothers and grandfathers, and our great-grandmothers and great-grandfathers, and our great-great-grandmothers and great-great-grandfathers, and on, from our ancestors, a belief that we are worth the breath that God breathed into our lungs. James Weldon Johnson metaphorically and poetically says that God scooped up the clay from the ground, breathed into it, and that human beings became living souls. This is what we believe. Those of us who believe in a God, those of us who believe that there is a matchless majesty to the Almighty in breathing life into us. And even if you happen not to be a believer, but you understand the magic of Black existence, the joy of Black existence, Black boy joy and Black girl magic. If you believe that there is a spirit that animates us, even if you don't attribute it to an ultimate divinity or a transcendent purpose, you know that given the history of Black people in this nation, that there is something majestic about our cause for advocacy of freedom, not only 100, 200, 300 years ago, but in our day and age together here. But not only the resiliency of our advocacy, but the power in our voice. And how important is that? Not only the voices of the famous, not only the voices of those whose names we can call because they have stood tall, though we appreciate them. Henry Highland Garnett, Sojourner Truth, Harriet Tubman, Nannie Helen Burroughs, Frederick Douglass, W.E.B. Du Bois, Booker T. Washington, Ida B. Wells Barnett, Mary Church Terrell, Septima Clark, Joanne Robinson, Rosa Parks, Martin Luther King Jr., Ralph Abernathy, Diane Nash, Angela Davis, James Baldwin, Ella Baker, Fannie Lou Hamer, and on and on and on. The power of our voice, the power of the prophetic voice. That is the voice that uses the scriptures, uses the Holy Writ, uses the religious traditions of whatever particular God you serve to believe that there is a reckoning and the celebration of justice in our own day. And those voices rang out prophetically to remind us, thus saith the Lord, or this is what the particular religious tradition that they study in and steady themselves in suggests. Whether you read the Holy Quran, the Bhagavad Gita, the Upanishads, the Tao Te Ching, the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance, Black Panther, Drake, Jay-Z, Beyonce, whatever your tradition, your spirited literary tradition, the Bible, whether you get the Holy Ghost or you get inspired by the examples of your people in the field struggling. We know that the Black voice has been extremely important, and the power of the Black voice is enormously instructive, because regardless of them trying to muffle our voices, trying to suppress our speech so that we could not talk, denying us access to literacy so that we could neither read nor write, and yet there was something deeply profound about the belief that in that Black voice, we could raise up the aspirations of our community, to articulate the noble dreams and hopes of a people. And so from the very beginning of our sojourn here, down to today, we know that those voices are extremely important. But not just those voices, your voices as well. Your voices in local organizations, your voices in governmental structures, your voices in the broader society, your voices in churches and temples and synagogues, your voices in sororities and fraternities, your voices in neighborhood meetings, your voices in Congress, your voices in politics, your voices everywhere. Makes a big difference. And the power of those voices, the power of that voice, derives from the fact that we would continue to appeal to those mothers and fathers of our movements, those ancestors who made it possible for us to claim our own voices in our own days, because they spoke up in their days, proudly, brilliantly, in gifted and talented fashion, in courage, refusing to look away from the necessity of embracing liberation as a major motif and a transcendent theme of our own particular struggle in America. And so the power of that voice has been heard in sermons and in speeches. What to the Negro is the 4th of July? That prophetic voice Frederick Douglass raised. He raised that question. He talked about the fact that July 4th, for many others, celebrated the birth of a nation, but for the Negro, but for the African in America, but for Black folk, it wasn't the same thing. It wasn't the same because we were not granted the same liberties and freedoms. It was not the same because even when we went to fight for America in foreign theaters of war and came back home, we were not treated fairly. In fact, in World War II, when we went off to fight for something we couldn't even enjoy back here, Black men were lynched because they had the unabashed temerity, the gall to wear an American uniform. And some people thought it was a travesty. And so we raise our voices. We raise our voices against inequality. We raise our voices against injustice. We raised our voices for the right to protest, for the right to exist in this nation as free citizens. We raised our voices to make sure that we could march in defense of our beliefs. The Great Marches on Washington by A. Philip Randolph, and then Randolph and Martin Luther King Jr., and John Lewis and James Farmer and Dorothy Height, though she was not acknowledged, because sometimes even when we raise our voices for righteous causes, we are simultaneously suppressing the voices of others, so that Black people were articulating our noble aspirations and our great dreams, and yet at the same time, we refused to allow Black women on stage that day. And yet raising our voices for our freedoms, for our liberation. Then in 1963, in that great march, and then in 64, where the Civil Rights Bill passed, and in 65, where the voting rights passed, because we raised our voices. Amelia Boynton and John Lewis raising their voices on the Edmund Pettus Bridge, and as they walked across that bridge into the greater precincts of freedom, after first being rebuffed and retarded by the vicious forces of white supremacy and law enforcement, they still stood up. They raised their voices regardless. And arguably the greatest American who ever lived. Now, we can argue about that. In my mind, Martin Luther King Jr. stood up the night before he was murdered and said, America, all we ask, be true to what you said on paper. If you said it, live it. If you wrote it, embody it. If you articulated it, then enflesh it. March it from parchment to pavement, from ink to inspiration. And so the power of his voice, along with the power of so many other people's voices, who have reminded America that America can never be fully American without the contributions of Black people in this nation. And so the power of our voice is there, but also the power of our singing. We know that Black people were reduced to entertainers, singing and dancing, but we sang and danced for ourselves too. And as I said earlier, while we were entertaining white folk, we were emancipating ourselves. Every time I feel the Spirit moving in my heart, I will pray. I'm going to move along like an inchworm, keep inching along. Noah, Noah, let me come in. The doors all fastened and the windows pinned. Keep your hand on that plow, hold on. Song after song. And not only in the spirituals, in the blues, in gospel, in jazz, in rock and roll, in rhythm and blues, in soul, in funk, and in hip hop. Although some of y'all might complain about hip hop, I'm sure some of y'all are dancing to it while complaining about it. Let me just say that. But then there's so many generations in hip hop now that you got the ones you like and the ones you can't understand. Or maybe that's just me. You could understand Big Papa. Used to fuss when the landlord dissed us. No heat. Wonder why Christmas missed us. Birthdays was the worst days. Now we sip champagne when we thirsty. Damn right I like the life I live, because I went from negative to positive, and it's all good. And if you don't know, now you know. All right? I won't repeat that part. Right? Or Tupac. Just the other day, I got lynched by some crooked cops, and to this day, them same cops on the beat getting major pay. But when I get my check, they taking tax out, so we paying the cops to knock the blacks out. That's some sophisticated economic analysis of being complicit in your own, suppression, your own oppression, and your own unjust treatment. And then you think about, of course, the great Lauryn Hill. Even after all my logic and my theory, I add a cuss word so you ignorant people hear me. And on and on. We can put some Snoop Dogg up in there. I'm going to get some West Coast love. We can get some NWA. After police coming straight from the underground. The young brother got it bad because I'm brown and not the other color. So police think they have the authority to kill a minority. Blank that for I ain't the one for a blank, blank, blank with the badge and the gun to be beaten on and thrown in jail. We can go toe to toe in the middle of a cell. All right? Now you got out what you got now? Everything I'm talking about, you know what I'm saying? You know what I'm saying? No, dog. No, not really. And I've been black all my life, 62 years. I have no idea what you talking about. I ain't mad at you, player. Get your money, but my God. And then everybody named the baby, mama baby, little baby, got a baby, baby mama, you know. All right, I'm sounding old up in this piece. I'm sounding old up in here. I'm sounding like I want some Marvin Gaye. Rockets, moonshots, spend it on the have-not. Make me want to holler, throw up both my hands. Although when I was young, I thought he was saying throw up on both my hands. I was like, that's nasty. But you know, we live in a generation, young people think, they say to themselves, I love Trey Songz. He said, you gonna think I invented sex. Not really, dog. I thought that was Barry White. I don't know if y'all know Barry White. Y'all don't remember the big teddy bear? Playing your game, baby, just you and me. Y'all don't know nothing about Barry. You young people don't know. I think Marvin Gaye had something to do with the invention of sex. I don't know about y'all. I don't see nothing wrong with you. Giving yourself to me can never be wrong if the spirit moves you. Did that Negro bring the Holy Ghost up into the bedroom? Lord have mercy. And then y'all know Teddy Pendergrass had something to do with it, right? You know, he started off soft like he was Barack Obama. Close the door, baby. Then he ended up like Al Sharpton, Jesse Jackson. Shut him off, right? So I think they had something to do with it, young people. But the point is that the voice was critical. The point is that the voice was an agent, an instrument of joy, of celebration, of love, of festivity, but also of hope and resistance to teach us that we must continue to focus on the powerful resistance movements that have made us who we are. And then finally, we talk about dedication in our hearts. And that's what your group is about. That's what Black America at its best is about. Dedication in our hearts. Dedication to what? Yep, to freedom and struggle and liberation. Yep, into resistance. Yep. But also to justice. Yep. But to creating the publicly acceptable form of Black self-love. Yeah. Because you know, in a day and age when white supremacy is deep, and let's be real, it's deeply entrenched right now. And, you know, I ain't going to get just straight up political, but we done lived through what we saw happen on January 6th, right here in the nation's capital. If that were Black people doing that, y'all know what time it is. Y'all know what that would have been. Y'all know what the consequences would be.
You can get political, doctor. Go ahead.
Well, God bless you then, brother. Well then, since 45 did that jive, but we still alive. But let me tell you this. The point is that he's like a 45. He put a 45 to our heads, right? The 44 before him, kick in the door, waving the 4-4 biggie. That was different. He was trying to protect us. This guy's trying to undermine us. So the bottom line is, here we are on 3 successive Tuesday, January 6th, right? The insurrection next Tuesday, inauguration, Tuesday after that, the impeachment. Why? Because Black people understand that when we look out here and see these people called patriots, when you are dragging a Confederate flag through the Capitol, the most sacred civic space in America, and you dragging a traitor's banner, and flag. You didn't even want to be part of the nation. You thought that the Capitol was antithetical to your beliefs. And now here you are dragging that flag of infamous derision of American democracy. And these people didn't make no difference. They said, we're going to lynch Mike Pence and Nancy Pelosi. Because the real religion for many of them, the real democracy for many of them, the real politics for many of them ain't democracy. The religion ain't Christianity as they claim. The real religion and the real politics is whiteness. And that whiteness is angry that black and brown and red and yellow people have made progress in America. And as a result of that, they mad. It's like the mad rappers. Tell them why you're mad, son. Tell them why you're mad. They are angry because regardless of what they have done to us, we keep rising. We keep moving forward. Ain't nothing gonna turn us around. We keep coming. And so as I end, the dedication in our hearts, we are the true devotees of democracy in this nation. Our blood, bathed in the soil of America, has propagated the liberation of this nation. The blood of Emmett Till, the blood of Martin Luther King Jr., the blood of Medgar Evers, the blood of Malcolm X, yes, and the blood of the Kennedys too. But our blood mixed with this soil has made America what it is today. And the dedication in our hearts means that what's good for us is good for the nation. Because we love this nation regardless, or as the brothers in the streets say, irregardless. We love this nation even when it don't deserve it. We still got love. Like some of our loved ones love us even though we don't deserve it. Maybe I'm just talking for myself. Even when I'm acting a fool, my daddy said, cut the fool. And our loved ones still love us. Mm-hmm. That's the kind of greatness we are. So I end as I began, to celebrate our history, to celebrate our power, and to celebrate the justice for which we have fought. We continue to uplift each other, because ultimately, as we uplift each other, we uplift this nation. God bless you so very much.
Good job, sir. Good job.
Bravo.
Good job. Good job. Good job.
Bravo.
Very good. Very good.
Great job. Great job. So much. Thank you.
Okay,
so
we'd
much.
like to open it up for questions.
Thank you. Thank you.
Tell me some more. Keep on talking.
No, I want to ask a question really seriously. Do you truly think Martin Luther King was actually that great in regards to what he actually brought forth in this country? That's what I wanted to find out.
Absolutely.
And I wanted to find out why.
Without question. Abraham Lincoln was a president. He had the imprimatur of the state. Thomas Jefferson had the protection of his white skin and, as being a founding father, political power. Barack Obama was elected to office and had bodyguards. This man had no bodyguards, was not officially elected. He was a private citizen. Mm-hmm. He spoke something like 370 times a year, ain't but 365 days in the year. Mm-hmm. And this man gave up his blood, his life, for the power of this nation to be enhanced and justice to be got. There is no question in my mind that he's the greatest American we produced.
Yeah. Okay. I just wanted to know your ideology in regards.
Yes, sir. No. I'm just trying to.
And I'm glad that you said that. And I'm glad that you brought it to understanding to me.
Yes, sir.
But I have a different outlook on that situation.
All right, who you got as the greatest?
I don't. But that's another subject that
I got you.
we would have to talk about later.
But let me tell you this. Let me finish by saying this too. A lot of
Yeah.
people say, well, King wasn't revolutionary. He was the greatest revolution. He was the greatest revolutionary. Why? Because he wasn't standing in Harlem talking about Negroes and talking about we were sellouts. He wasn't on the sidelines.
Mhm.
Some of our greatest, and I love them,
I agree.
our greatest revolutionaries
I
on
agree.
the sideline talking about King is a sellout. He's down in Birmingham where the fight is. If you bad, take your boys down to Birmingham and see if Bull Connor won't whip your black behind.
Mhm. Right,
And if you can
right.
survive then, telling me about what you can do, then I will get down with you. And in the meantime, I'm saying that this figure
Mhm.
went inside the halls of power like Samson and knocked it down from within. He was a revolutionary. Even the FBI said he's the most dangerous Negro leader in America. And they said it for a reason, because he spoke their language, eloquent in their tradition, trained in their PhD system,
Absolutely.
and used it to challenge them and to topple the vicious environs and towers of white supremacy. That's why I say it.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. I appreciate that. Thank you.
Are there any other questions?
You have two more. They need to be unmuted. Hazel, Zano, and Sister Lawrence. Hazel,
Hello.
you're unmuted.
Oh, thank you. Hello, Mr. Dyson. This is Ms. Zano. I have a question for you, sir. On the current climate of where we are nowadays, President Biden came out with the racial equity executive order. In your opinion, do you believe that's going to actually, hopefully one day, get us to where we need to be as a people, if that makes sense? I know it's going to be a long, hard road because you still have cops getting off for murders of our people, and there's not a lot of Black home ownership, and businesses are being shut down, stuff like that. But do you believe, not just because he did it for the federal, but also in the states, you think that not only just Republican and democratically ran states, do you believe that there will be some changes because of the uprising that's going on now for our people?
Yes, ma'am. Thank you, Ms. Zano. Look, first of all, when have we ever had a president who during his inaugural address used the words white supremacy and systemic racism? Never. Never. No other president has ever said that, right? Now, we could argue that Obama's back was against the wall because he was perceived as Black, therefore he looked like he was hooking Black folk up. So he was quite consternated about that and very much challenged in the belief that if he spoke about issues of race, he would be seen as being partisan. I still say there's a lot more that could have been done even with that limitation, but that's neither here nor there. So when I see Joe Biden stand up and say that, that is a sign of progress. Now, white privilege allows him the opportunity to speak about race in a way that Black people couldn't. Because ain't nobody gonna say to him, oh, he's trying to get him to hook up and everything like that. He's doing it out of conscience. Do I think it will help along with the protests in the street? Absolutely. By itself, no, but in concert, an executive order over here, constant or social resistance over there, constant pressure put upon a good man. The reality is that you could put all the pressure you want on a previous chief executive officer, it would make no difference because that particular person didn't care. This particular person does care. So therefore you can flex a little bit. You can push a little bit. Oh, you don't want to give the relief of $50,000 of debt to students? Why not? 10,000 is not enough. You got elbow room, right? And so I think that yes, along with what goes on in the streets, and you can never leave it one to the other. We need the political power of executive orders and the executive branch in tune with the social justice movement. But we don't expect the executive office to lead that social justice movement. They're not going to speak for us. They're not going to articulate our viewpoints. Obama didn't do it. Clinton didn't do it. Nixon didn't do it. Reagan didn't do it. Bush ain't done it. Trump ain't done it. We have to do it for ourselves, right? We have to maintain the integrity and the power of our commitment to social resistance, to put pressure on elected officials to make certain that they do the right thing. But I am heartened by the fact that in doing that, he has made clear that his position is in support of African American struggle. He has also supported the fact that we're going to study reparations in Congress. So there's been a shift of power. There's been a shift in perspective, and there's been an opening of the mind. Is it enough? Of course not. That's why organizations like yours are very important. That's why labor movements are extremely important. That's why the AFL-CIO was important back in its day in joining with the March on Washington, right? Because they understood that labor was important. The Brotherhood of Sleeping Car Porters with A. Philip Randolph, and then Chandler Owens, right, as a socialist organization, and then subsequently as a Black labor movement, was extremely vital and important in arguing for the progressive liberation and emancipation of working class people and of American citizens more broadly, and particularly African Americans. So yes, I think it's extremely important what he did. It sends a signal that he's serious about his commitment to Black people. And plus, when you think about it, we hooked him up. And he's acknowledging we hooked him up. A lot of presidents get hooked up and don't acknowledge that they got hooked up by us. So when I put all that together, I do think it moves us in the right direction. Not nearly far enough, but certainly on the right path.
Thank you very much, sir.
I think we had a question in the chat from David Schlein, and I think you just answered his question. So we're going to go to the, looks like.
You have Ms. Lawrence that was next.
Right, we have 4 more questions, and then we're going to close it. The next person is Tanika Lawrence.
Thank you. Dr. Dyson, I'm wondering, based on the conversation that we just had about Dr. King, where do you think we as a community, Black community, are headed without a leader, and why do you think we haven't had one since probably Dr. King?
Well, yes, ma'am. Well, thank you so much, Ms. Lawrence, for that. I think
My pleasure.
Thank you so very kindly. I think we've had leaders. I mean, Maxine Waters is a heck of a leader. I think that Ayanna Pressley is a heck of a leader. I think that Tamika Mallory is a heck of a leader. I think Reverend Al Sharpton is a heck of a leader. I think Martin Luther King Jr., his main protege at the end of his life, Jesse Jackson, carried us for a long time. Now, the notion of one Black leader is probably done. We always had more than one. While there was Martin Luther King Jr., there was John Lewis, there was Diane Nash, there was Ella Baker, there was
Chuck D.
Was that?
Said Chuck D. Somebody typed in Chuck D.
Not Chuck D.
As a leader.
Elvis was a hero, but he never meant to mean straight up racist. Simple and plain. Already I'm hyped because I'm mad. Most of my heroes don't appear on those stamps. I ain't mad. Chuck D could be your leader. And he's also spoken out very bravely in defense of King's birthday in Arizona. By the time I get to Arizona. So yeah, depending on where you are, leaders are found at every level. So Chuck D could be a leader for them. Jay-Z could be a leader. Beyonce could be a leader for some people. Beyonce made this remarkable statement. It has been said that racism is so American that to protest racism is to protest America, right? So we can find leader-like qualities, but real leaders like the ones you're talking about, I think we have had them, but we will never again, because we are so diverse, we are so complicated, and we are so nuanced that we have had a broad variety of leaders, not only during King's time, but during our time as well. You know, when we say, who's the white leader? Well, there ain't no such thing because there are multiple people in business and entertainment, but we're in a unique position. Our entertainers and our athletes have often been granted and afforded a kind of pleasure, a kind of opportunity, and a kind of freedom that the rest of us didn't. Therefore, they bore a responsibility to be able to make, dents in, racism and white supremacy in this country. So I think we have many leaders, And I think we will continue to have them, but we will not go back to a time when we had one unifying voice and one unifying force. We never did, but we're even further away from that right now. So the beautiful thing about us is that, you know, there are so many people who are articulating values and visions and virtues that are germane to our Black freedom movement and the perpetuation of legacies of freedom and justice. Get with the one that speaks for you. Get behind those people who articulate your values and your visions. Maybe you like the Urban League with Mark Morial. Maybe you like National Action Network with Reverend Al Sharpton. Maybe you like Melanie Campbell with the National Women's Roundtable. Maybe you like, Dorothy Heights organization, National Council of Negro Women, so that there are many groups that entertain, or the NAACP with Derek Johnson. There are many groups that articulate our ideas. Now, many of them do come together and try to agree, but there are different ways. Everybody ain't a Delta, everybody ain't a AKA, everybody ain't Greek. Some people are me, some people are doing their thing. Some people got the candy cane stick. Some people are doing the Omega Psi Phi. Some people are alphas, and some people ain't nothing like that. But whatever your group is, whatever your groove is, whatever your stilo is, find your resonance with others, join together, and make your contribution at that level.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Ms. Lawrence.
Okay, we're running short on time, so the last two
I'll be
questions.
I'll be real short on these answers.
Okay.
I'll be real short on these answers.
You're fine.
Stop over talking, Dyson. Okay, I'll be cool. I'll be good.
The next two questions will be from Sharon Bethune first, and then from Mr. Lockett.
Hi, hi, you know what? I have more of a comment than anything. As you can see, my last name is Bethune. My husband's great-grandmother is Mary McLeod Bethune. We praise her, we know her work, great educator. But some of the conversations that me and my husband have, just based on what you just said, find your own. My greatest hero would be my grandfather. Coming from Gulfport, Mississippi, well, actually, he was from Port Gibson, Mississippi, was forced off his land, had become an entrepreneur in that area. He was also the head of the NAACP in that area. He fought, he stood, he rose up. He got Blacks together to stand against the injustice down there in Mississippi back in the 1960s. You know how hard that is. They found out, whites in that area told him that he had too much power.
Right.
They have put a bounty on his head. Not only on his head, but my grandmother's head, my auntie's head, my mother's head. They were forced off their acres of land that they owned.
Right.
But you know what? It was a white man who came to him and told him, Bro John, y'all got to go. They're coming for you. They're coming for you. So just like you said, when you find that person in your life that brings that drive to you, it's not always someone who makes the history books. It's not always someone who's in a public eye. It could be someone who have walked beside you that whole time, who encourages you to stand up for injustice. And that's my comment. Thank you.
Thank you so very much. And I spoke for commencement at Bethune-Cookman a couple years ago. So I got mad love for the great Mary McLeod Bethune, one of our great leaders as well. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, Sharon. And then we'll have a question from Mark Lockett. And Dr. Dyson, if you don't mind, we'll take one more question from the chat. It's a question from a woman's perspective, and I think it will be helpful.
All right, very good.
Mr. Lockett.
Good evening, Dr. Dyson and fellow brothers and sisters in labor. I just had a question because you're an educator on the front lines of young people. So how do we motivate the younger generation who appears to be desensitized to the struggles of social issues like equal rights for labor or human rights for justice?
Yes, sir. That's a great point. I think we got to teach them. Partly it's the fact that we are cut off from each other. There's little intergenerational cooperation. Old folk over here, middle-aged folk over here, young folk over here. and we ain't hanging out with each other. We're not talking to each other. We're not trying to engage each other. And it's the responsibility of the older folk to reach out to the younger folk more than the younger folk reaching out to us. Let me just say that. Having said that, it's also important for younger people to understand where they're coming from and who gave them their juice and who gave them their inspiration and who gave them the power and the precedent. So it is incumbent upon young people as well to study their history, and in studying their history, to acknowledge those who came before them. You know, we cannot have this vicious, and jealous assault upon history on the one hand, or the future on the other hand. Old folk hating on young folk trying to disrespect and disregard old folk and act like they ain't had nobody come along. You ain't the first one to do it. Even if you got the hottest dance, somebody had a hot dance before you. You ain't, this ain't the first hot girl summer. There were other hot girl summers. All right. My God, we were dancing in the streets. That was a hot girl summer, right? Martha Reeves and the Vandellas. That was before Megan Thee Stallion. I ain't against Megan Thee Stallion. Busted. Whoop. All right, that ain't Megan, but you know what I'm saying. You know what I'm saying, the busted challenge. I'm on top of this. I'm old, but I understand. So the thing is that we got to be able to appreciate what young people are up against and not diss them. Yo, young people, you don't know a damn thing about what's going on. Teach them. Give them a sense of what the labor movement has been about. Give them a sense that Walter Reuther wasn't by himself. Give them a sense of what happened in, and look, I was raised in Detroit, Michigan. So I'm part of the UAW. You understand? And the UAW was central. My daddy was part of UAW. I was UAW member. So we were in the automobile industry, wheel breaking drum company, Kelsey Hayes. I worked there, not on no summer job. That was my for real job. So I'm a union man. I understand what unions do. A lot of bad names have been attached to unions. A lot of bad reputations have been attached to unions. A lot of besmirching of unions has gone on. So we got to correct that. We got to counteract that. We got to teach that. The drum in Detroit. Detroit Revolutionary Union Movement. Look, I'm right there in the middle of it. Ken Cockrell was Johnny Cochran before Johnny Cochran was Johnny Cochran. So we got to teach them that history. We got to give them a sense of what's going on so that they understand the liberatory and emancipatory origins and sources of their contemporary struggles. And maybe they can learn something from what we did earlier in the past and people older than us did. And at the same time, we can learn some of the techniques and modalities of resistance from them. So it's got to be an open-minded embrace, but it's a great question.
Thank you. We have one question in the chat from LaRonda Gamble, who is the president of our AFGE Local 12 local Department of Labor. African-American females have been leaders for some time. However, they are not respected when it comes to corporate America. What will it take for African-American women to break that glass ceiling?
No, it's a great point. That's why I named a lot of women, because I take them seriously. I wrote a book called Why I Love Black Women. I wasn't trying to pander. I wrote it before I got here years ago, almost 20 years ago, when people weren't giving Black women love. And I wrote about a lot of Black leaders in there, from Angela Davis to Kimberly Crenshaw to my teacher, Mrs. James. So you're right. I mean, Roz Brewer just became the head of what? Is it Walgreens? I think now she's maybe the only Black woman in the Fortune 500, which is crazy. Because we know Black women run stuff. And sometimes, Black men stop. Come on now. She running your life. You know she can run a corporation, Negro. She running your thing. even though we pretend like, yeah, I'm in charge. I'm the man. You know who running stuff. Stop lying. When I know something, I say, I ain't asking you. I'm asking your wife. Hey, can he do this? All right, thank you, man. Because that's what it is. Maybe I'm speaking for myself, but that's just how it is, right? When Black women been running stuff, been in charge. Let me tell you what, the day of the March on Washington, when I said, remember I talked about sexism, that they wouldn't even allow Black women, Dorothy Height they call it the Big Six. It should have been the Big Seven, because Dorothy Height was right there, but they weren't giving her no love. So on the day of the March on Washington, Josephine Baker and Mahalia Jackson were the only ones let up on stage, and they were there to perform, right? And to talk a little bit. So while Martin Luther King Jr. is giving his speech, Mahalia Jackson says from the sideline, now King was doing his thing 50 years ago.
Tell him about the tree.
America, you know, right? Great American in whose symbolic shadow we stand today, signed the Emancipation Proclamation. He was doing it. Now, for anybody else, that was an A+ speech, but for him, about a C, C+, B-. You know, King ain't used to read. He was an improvisational speaker. Now, that improvisation don't mean you ain't prepared. It just means you ain't stuck to a text so you could flow. So just like when my good brother Fleming just inserted my punchline, I had to redirect your attention to void out his prescient answer so I could build my narrative. Jesus, that's what an improvisational speaker does. But so Mahalia Jackson is standing on the sideline, and when she saw her brother struggling, she said, "Tell him about the dream, Martin." And then he put the paper down. A few minutes later, he said, "Despite the difficulties of today and tomorrow, I still have a dream." And that's the part you remember. Even when Black women ain't on program, they still in charge. Man, if I were in church, I said, Lord. So the thing is that Black women have the skills. One of the things I love about Joe Biden is that he set Kamala Harris up to be the first female president of the United States of America. And he's already pledged that he's gonna put a Black woman on the Supreme Court. I mean, come on, that ain't bad for a white guy. That ain't bad for no guy. That ain't bad for nobody. Because Barack Obama had 3 chances. Did he choose a Black woman? I know that's y'all boo. I know that's y'all boo. I know you think he's Renee Jean Paul, you know, he's Bridget. You understand? He had 3 chances to put a Black woman on there. I don't think he put one up. I don't think he did. I don't think he nominated her. I ain't mad at you, baby. I'm just saying this man has already pledged to put a Black woman there because a Black woman should have been up there a long time ago. What will it take to break the glass ceiling? The constant, excellent performance of Black women has already mandated taking it seriously. As we began to break the glass ceiling with Walgreens and Ross Brewer, and the vice presidency with Kamala Harris, we begin to create tension so that ceiling begins to crack, and we begin to move aside those men who, though they believe they are the only ones who richly deserve those positions, have stepped on the backs of women, especially Black women, to get there. So we must continue as men to acknowledge the central contribution of women and join with them to make certain that we do the right thing.
Thank you so much. I think our National Vice President, Otis Johnson, has a few remarks for you.
All right.
Dr. Dyson, we want to thank you, but I have one more question for you.
Yes, sir.
I have a lot of DC leaders that's on here. How do you feel about DC statehood?
Hell yeah. We ought to have been to say, look, we paying all these taxes. Last time I checked, as Nipsey Hussle said, last time that I checked, they taking taxes out of my dadgum check, but I can't get no representation. We ain't got no senator, and we need to make my lady not just an honorary member of Congress, but a fully voting member. We need statehood up in this piece. Let's make it happen.
But Dr. Dyson, on behalf of myself and all of the leaders here in District 14, we truly, truly appreciate this knowledge that you have given to us today. And it was just a blessing, and it was much needed. And anytime that you want to speak to us, just feel free to reach out to us. And we will be glad to have you to come back again, just to drop some more knowledge on us, sir. Again, we truly appreciate your time and coming here with us, because you could have been anywhere, but you found it in your heart to be here with us today. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir. Great opportunity to be here. God bless y'all. Keep up the great work. And thank you for this wonderful opportunity to commune with you just a few minutes on Sunday night.
Thank you.